Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Our next presenter is Michael Salla, Ph.D., Dr. Michael Salla, as it were. I just want to tell you a few things about Michael for those of you that are not too familiar with him. First of all, he was a professor at American University in Washington, D.C. for 8 years. 8 years. It's a long time to hold a job down anywhere, isn't it? In any kind of job. 8 years, think about it. And all of a sudden, he wasn't good enough anymore. He got the boot. They kicked him out the door. Why do you think that might have happened? Exopolitics. Yeah, he started to talk about things that are still, unfortunately, a little bit verboten. But he made the best of it because when they gave him the boot, he moved to Hawaii. He got very lucky, met a beautiful girl, got married. And he said, okay, this just cost me my job and my career, but what the heck? Let's continue. Let's not give up. So he formed the Exopolitics Institute. They put on their first conference last year, and their upcoming conference this year in Hawaii again is going to be May 11th to the 13th. So any of you guys that need a little bit of sun in May, you might think about that one. Ladies and gentlemen, big welcome for Dr. Michael Salla.
Thank you. Aloha. It's great to be back again, and I want to thank Bob and all of those in the International UFO Congress for inviting me back. And I'm going to be talking about a topic that's just so exciting for me. I've been working in this area now since 2001, which really isn't that long in terms of some of the people who have been in this field for decades. I wasn't an experiencer. I didn't have any great encounter or anything that was directly personal in terms of extraterrestrials, even though I always believed that there was extraterrestrial life out there, but I never thought that they actually were visiting and that they had been integrated or in any way involved with life on the planet Earth. And so when I saw Dr. Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project press conference in May of 2001, well, my world changed. That affected my research interests at American University, and unfortunately, universities aren't as enlightened and progressive as we would think. And certainly I thought that they would be open to my new research study, but they certainly weren't. Once I declared that I was going to write about this, I was told in no uncertain terms by the director of the center that I was in that this exopolitics research has no place within the Center for Global Peace, nor any place in American University. And so I basically had to go quiet, do things behind the scenes, and that cut off a lot of opportunities and a lot of things that I normally did in the other programs that I had been involved in over the years, organizing events, conferences, seminars, raising grants. I mean, I raised $150,000 with the Ford Foundation to organize seminars involving East Timorese. So I was used to getting support to do these sort of things. So all of a sudden that was cut out, couldn't do any of that. And so I went on for a little while, and in 2004 I was lucky enough to get the Washington Post to take some of my research seriously about President Eisenhower having met with extraterrestrials in 1954. A full feature story appeared in the Washington Post, the feature section, front page, or the style section, front page. University rang me up and basically told me that my position there was no longer safe. And sure enough, a few weeks later, I was told that the program I had been organizing, the Peace Ambassador program at the Center for Global Peace, had been summarily cancelled. My appointment would not be renewed at the end of August in 2004, and so that was quite a shock. Really made me sick to the stomach to realize what had happened. I lost a lot of things as a result of that. The most difficult was family, children, sort of thing. Had to send off my son to New Zealand to be with his mother because I no longer had a job. I no longer had a way of staying in the United States. So I thought, well, I better go back to Australia. It's my home. I get supported there. I've got family. I can start all over again. As it turned out, the universe was kind. It kind of sent me via Hawaii first. Hawaii's halfway between the US and Australia. And I met a lovely lady and fell in love and have been there ever since. And my life has changed, and I've been able to continue to do my exopolitics research, which I love. And we are now moving forward with the Exopolitics Institute, which is an organisation that I hope will help support the efforts of researchers like myself who are professionals or were professionals and strike some really difficult situations with their employers and their superiors, and also organising events and doing other exopolitics research. So that takes me to this particular topic, which I find to be very exciting. It's fascinating to look at the evidence of extraterrestrials among us, and I'm very happy that Paola Harris went first and actually raised that idea and had some photos and was able to discuss some of the evidence that she has found for this. And so that really does set the scene. It was just serendipity that Paola would present on that topic just before me, so it's very pleasant to know that there is that synchronicity happening here. But I'm going to look at the evidence and the implications of this phenomenon, because it is a very powerful phenomenon. The idea of extraterrestrials having integrated with human society. I mean, we're not talking about UFOs in the skies. We're not talking about the occasional visit where the extraterrestrials will be seen exiting a craft, or people meeting with extraterrestrials in these ships or being taken up in the ships. All very important phenomena, fascinating. But we're actually talking about extraterrestrials who come here and integrate, in a way, infiltrate our society and live amongst us. So, I mean, what's the evidence for this? What are the implications for this? I'm going to look at that. So the background. A number of contactees claim to have met with human-looking extraterrestrials who have integrated into human society. There's been a long history of this. These contactees, there are a number of them, and I'm going to speak about 4 or 5 of them that I think are most credible and who have been most supported by the evidence that they've given. These extraterrestrials adopt local customs, speak national languages, possess detailed knowledge of local terrain, and drive cars. So these are people or extraterrestrials that look like us. As you can see, that picture there is one of the few of what many believe to be a genuine extraterrestrial who has visited and integrated with human society and, in fact, spoke to prominent political leaders and military leaders in the United States. That picture is of Valiant Thor, that many people believe was credible, that this was indeed a human extraterrestrial here to talk with our leaders and also those in private society. Generally, they're indistinguishable from humans, very attractive. They adopt non-invasive methods of interaction. So I'll repeat that, non-invasive. So much of the literature on extraterrestrials deals with invasive procedures of extraterrestrial visitors. And that, of course, is a scary thing because we can't control this. They're so much more powerful. But here we have a class of extraterrestrial visitors who adopt non-invasive. Basically, they're very respectful and don't violate our free will. That's important. So the first of the contactees was George Adamski, who was the first major contactee to openly come out and discuss extraterrestrials living amongst us. In his first non-fiction book, The Flying Saucers Have Landed, he described in detail his first interaction with human-looking ET. So this was in 1952, and he meets this extraterrestrial called Orthon. So he describes this event that happened in November 20, 1952, at a particular location in the California desert, Mojave Desert, the desert landing, where he was guided or received telepathic messages to go to a certain location and to have an encounter. And so he went with 6 witnesses. 6 people went with him to verify if this was true or not. So first of all, they saw a large cylindrical mothership pass over the sky. And they were there with cameras, and they were taking shots of all of this, and they had film cameras as well, so they were getting the evidence. So first, the cylindrical mothership, very large, came overhead, then it flew off. And then soon after, a number of US Air Force jets flew past in hot pursuit. Then not long after that, a smaller craft, a scout craft, similar to what you see there in that picture, came and it landed. And Adamski went off to rendezvous with that craft, and he asked his 6 visitors to stay at some distance. They were about a mile away, and they had binoculars, and so they were witnessing things, taking shots, and so forth. So this was witnessed, and he had a meeting with an extraterrestrial called Orthon from Venus. So it was claimed. So these 6 witnesses each signed an affidavit supporting Adamski's version of events, and 3 days later, 4 of them went to one of the local newspapers and actually gave their version of what they saw, substantiating what Adamski had encountered. Now, the extraterrestrial, as you can see in that second graphic there, blonde, blue-eyed, very attractive being, and this really helped set off what became known as the Space Brothers phenomenon, where these beautiful, blue-eyed, blonde extraterrestrials, not all, of course, were blonde, blue-eyed, but that was the stereotype that soon developed, that these were very beautiful, attractive extraterrestrial visitors, some of them very tall, 7 foot, others more our own height, who were visiting and interacting with us. Well, just how credible was Adamski? I think many have debated him over the decades. I think one of the most credible researchers or investigators into the Adamski affair is Timothy Good, and he investigated Adamski's claims regarding extraterrestrial contact and believed that some of these were very sensible and verifiable. And quote from his book Alien Base, Timothy Good says, "I take the view that his reported encounters with spacecraft and their operators were fundamentally accurately reported." So this is Timothy Good, one of the best UFO researchers in the field, and I think he has a very even-handed and open-minded and analytical approach to these contactee testimonies. Of course, they're fantastic claims, but I think you need to have a kind of open-minded and non-biased view in evaluating these, and Timothy Good has that. And we're very fortunate to have researchers like Timothy Good and Wendell Stevens, who over the decades have taken an open-minded, non-biased approach to this contactee testimony. Adamski's second book described his experiences inside the spaceships. And one of the experiences that Adamski had was when he went to a Los Angeles hotel to again follow up an intuitive or telepathic prompt to get ready for a contact. And he says, quote, in his book, Inside the Flying Saucers, quote, "I looked at my wristwatch and saw that it said 10:30. And just at this moment, 2 men approached, one of whom addressed me by name. Both were complete strangers, and nothing in their appearance to indicate that they were other than average young businessmen. I noted that both men were well proportioned. The speaker extended his hand, and when it touched mine, a great joy filled me. The signal was the same as had been given me by the man I had met on the desert on that memorable November 20, 1952. So here Adamski is describing being in a Los Angeles hotel, acting on an intuitive telepathic prompt, and an extraterrestrial approached him, or someone who looked like an ordinary businessman, as you can see here in that photo of another extraterrestrial by the name of Don, who was also part of the Valiant Thor set of photos that I'll talk about a little bit later. And so Adamski went ahead and recognized that this individual was very special. So what happens? Together, Adamski continues, together we left the lobby. A block north of the hotel, they turned into a parking lot where they had a car waiting. The younger man slid into the driver's seat, motioning me to get in beside him. Our other companion also sat with us on the front seat. The man who had taken the wheel seemed to know exactly where he was going and drove skillfully. I am not familiar with all the new highways leading out of Los Angeles, so I had no idea in which direction we were heading. We rode in silence. So here's an extraterrestrial that looks like an ordinary businessman with a car. Adamski gets in the extraterrestrial to the visitor's car, who has a companion, and they set off in the busy LA freeway system. Adamski didn't know his way around, but these extraterrestrials apparently did. Adamski continues describing what happened. Lights and dwellings thinned as we left the outskirts of the city. The taller man spoke for the first time as he said, "You have been very patient. We know how much you are wondering who we are and where we are taking you." The speaker smiled and indicated the driver. "He's from the planet you call Mars. I'm from the one you call Saturn." His voice was soft and pleasant and his English perfect. I found myself wondering how and whether they had learned to speak our language so well. So these are extraterrestrial visitors who speak the English language perfectly. They apparently can learn it to that extent that no one would know anything other than that they were just ordinary American businessmen. So they revealed their Earth operations. The Martian now spoke for the first time, according to Adamski. "We are what you on Earth might call contact men. We live and work here because, as you know, it is necessary on Earth to earn money with which to buy clothing, food, and the many things that people must have. We have lived on your planet now for several years. At first, we did have a slight accent, but that has been overcome, and as you can see, we are unrecognized as other Earthmen. At our work and in our leisure time, we mingle with people here on Earth, never betraying the secret that we are inhabitants of other worlds. That would be dangerous, as you well know." So these are visitors who not only speak our language perfectly, are indistinguishable from us, but they also buy clothes, have money, do things that many other people would consider to be normal. And they do this for a number of years. It's not just land, have a look around and take off, but they're here for a number of years. And they're called contact men. Well, what in the world does that mean? We'll see a little bit later what that entails in terms of extraterrestrials having bases or residences in human society, especially in metropolitan areas. So that was George Adamski. I'm going to be talking now about another contactee, Daniel Fry, who in 1949 met with an extraterrestrial at White Sands Proving Ground. Fry was employed at a complex at White Sands Proving Ground as a technician with Aerojet General Corporation working on rocket propulsion systems. So this was someone who had some technical training. He was proficient with the aerospace industry. He was working at a very sensitive location. White Sands Proving Grounds is the location where the German scientists were relocated to develop the Apollo program and adapt the V2 rockets that were taken from Germany after the Second World War and get them basically researched and manufactured here in the United States. So this was a very sensitive installation. Fry had obviously the credentials and the expertise and the knowledge to work at that place and work with very competent individuals. But he was reporting an incident involving extraterrestrials. He met with an extraterrestrial called Alan. So Alan showed Fry his ship, explained its propulsion system, and took him for a ride to New York and back in 30 minutes. So that was the White Sands incident that's described in Fry's book. This is Alan speaking to Fry. Quote, "I am not, as you call it, a Yank, although my present assignment requires me to become one." So here he's talking about an assignment. Again, there's a mission, there's a program here where these extraterrestrials have to adopt an identity which would fit in with mainstream American society. The fact that you believe me to be one of your countrymen is a testimonial to the success of the effort I've expended during the last 2 of your years to learn and practice the use of your language and idiom. So they're spending a number of years learning how to speak our language and our idiomatic expressions perfectly so that they are not easily identified. As a matter of fact, Fry continues, I've never yet set foot upon your planet. It will require at least 4 more of your years for me to become adapted to your atmosphere and gravity and to become immunized to your biotics. So there's a procedure that's being followed here. The end result will be that this extraterrestrial, after having become immunized, having adapted to our local gravity, having learned the language and learned something about our idiomatic expressions, will then be able to fit in innocuously and not be identified. Incredible information. So Fry revealed this. And the ET asked Fry to assist him in integrating with the Earth population. Fry supplied textbooks on English and mathematics. Alan also asked Fry to get a forged birth certificate and passport for Alan. Quote, since my origin was actually extraterrestrial, it was therefore necessary to find a county registrar who could the need for my being here and be willing to assist even at some risks to himself, end quote. So essentially, there was even a county registrar who was sympathetic to the extraterrestrials and was willing to forge documents so that the extraterrestrials could fit in. So this is not something that's just involving one individual. It's quite extensive. Fry supplied evidence in the form of photographs, film, and was available for interviews. Good investigated Fry's case and found his story to be, quote, essentially true. Again, in Timothy Good's book, I think it's essential reading, Alien Base. If anyone's interested in the data on extraterrestrials living amongst us, you really need to start with this book, and that will then open up a whole series of other cases that can be researched. So Fry and Good continued, quote, Fry did take at least one genuine photograph of a UFO, end quote. And that's the photo of the UFO Fry took. So Good basically was saying that he believed at least some of Fry's testimony was true, and that is very important. So this means Fry was not embellishing or making up something else. There was a real substance to what he was experiencing. The ET told Fry, this is important to better understand exactly what they do here, quote, we have made a careful analysis of the steps to be taken so that I may move easily and unnoticed among your people. I must have a profession, or at least a gainful occupation. The ideal occupation would be that of a purchasing agent in an international trading concern. Such a position would furnish a means of livelihood, a good background cover, and an excellent excuse to visit other countries whenever it might become necessary, end quote. So this is incredible information. We're being told that this extraterrestrial not only is seeking assistance in being able to integrate, learn the language, get documentation, but also wants to take up a profession which would give him a cover to be able to travel around the world and brief other individuals, political leaders, wherever the opportunity arises. So here we get a sense of a systematic education campaign that is being taken up by a number of extraterrestrial visitors using human-looking ETs who have integrated amongst the human population. Another contactee, prominent contactee, Howard Menger, he wrote From Outer Space, where he described a number of extraterrestrial encounters beginning during his youth when he met an attractive extraterrestrial female when he was 10 years old. And that's the cover of his book, From Outer Space to You, with a picture of the extraterrestrial female he met. In the fall of 1947, and so here Menger is describing in his book another incident where he is met with where he encounters extraterrestrial visitors who look like us and are basically assuming normal identities. In the fall of 1947, a young man neatly dressed in fall clothing entered the shop. Though he said he was a real estate man, there was something odd about him. He told me he was thinking of putting up some for sale signs near a place called Pleasant Grove, about 8 miles from the shop, and would like some advice. I agreed to go with him. He did not introduce me to a young lady waiting in the car. Halfway there, the conversation fell off and there was silence. Very abruptly, the man changed the subject. Howard, we know you are keeping your contacts with our brothers a secret, as you have been instructed. And Menger replies, oh, you are... And I chuckled. He drove a few hundred yards without speaking further. You see, Howard, I've been taught much of real estate, but little of acting. So again, here you have an example of a contactee meeting with an extraterrestrial who has assumed a very human identity and who's learned how to navigate our road system, has what appears to be a kind of normal job, and he's accompanied by a companion, in this case an extraterrestrial female, probably something like this picture, also from the Howard Menger case of what is allegedly an extraterrestrial female. So Menger describes helping ET visitors adjust to Earth, let me go back to that, by providing them with clothes, giving them haircuts, dark glasses, and giving general assistance. So this is, again, just part of this amazing information that we have had here for decades, that these contactees not only had these encounters, but also helped the extraterrestrials to adjust by providing them with clothes, haircuts even, dark glasses, and giving whatever general assistance so that these extraterrestrials could accommodate to life in human society or in American society. So these contactees like Menger allegedly were playing a key role in assisting these visitors become, as in Adamski's case, contact men. Often I purchased clothing and took it to the point of contact. Visitors just arriving from other planets had to be attired in terrestrial clothing so they could pass unnoticed among people. So it seems that Menger was one of those contactees who actually assisted the newly arrived visitors from off-planet locations who needed to adjust, who needed to learn a little bit about our culture and methods of interaction, and needed to be given clothing and whatever other assistance they needed so that they could adjust and then go out and perform the mission, which appears to be clearly one of integrating with the population, taking innocuous identities, not revealing themselves, and basically meeting people and disseminating information, and meeting with, importantly, prominent leaders. So Timothy Good conducted a thorough investigation of Menger's claims, again in Alien Base, and says, quote, "Some of the evidence suggests that he did indeed have encounters with apparent extraterrestrials, some of which were observed by credible witnesses. And regarding the photographic and Sony film evidence, my feeling is that some of it is genuine," end quote. So again, one of the most credible UFO researchers believes that Menger's case is not some fantastic delusion. It's supported by credible witnesses, photographs, film is also there to support it. And Timothy Good is a very thorough investigator. So again, this is not something to just be dismissed. It needs to be analysed and investigated in a serious manner. I want to talk about another case, which is one that Wendell Stevens spent some time investigating. This is Professor Hernandez, who worked at the University of Mexico. And I know Jaime Musoni's here, so I would love to hear from Jaime if he knows anything about this case and anything he can tell us about the investigator, Zither Rodriguez. Apparently, this professor was tenured at the medical school at the University of Mexico. He was also a senior member of the Mexican Atomic Energy Commission, and he was working at his office, and he met with the Mexican journalist by the name of Zither Rodriguez, who he told his incredible story to. And he used the pseudonym of Professor Hernandez to basically give him some anonymity. So a very attractive extraterrestrial female by the name of Elense, but dubbed Elia, from the constellation Andromeda, posed as a student and visited him in his lecture classroom several times from 1972 to 1974. After she displayed remarkable knowledge of physics as well as paranormal abilities, Hernandez was eventually told by Elia that she was from another world. After further meetings in 1975, she eventually persuaded him to join her as a co-pilot in her outer space vehicle. Well, there's no picture of Elia, but I thought maybe what I could do is show this one of Semjase from the Billy Meyer case. And what was interesting was that there was a connection with the Billy Meyer case, and Wendell Stevens speaks about this, where basically Hernandez confirmed the Billy Meyer case was genuine, even though Hernandez had no knowledge of that, and his experiences began from 1972 to 1974, before the Meyer case was actually known in the West. And so this was incredible confirmation for another contactee case that involved an extraterrestrial female. So after revealing aspects of his contact experiences to physicians, let me just back up here. Basically, how credible is Fernandez? I mean, this is amazing information, as are all of these stories of contactees. Zither Rodriguez, the Mexican journalist who investigated, actually went to the Atomic Energy Commission or the University of Mexico to get some information from a source on another story, and she was pulled into Hernandez's office by him, where he told her this incredible story. So Zither Rodriguez could confirm that he wasn't actually who he claimed to be. So this was a tenured professor at a major university in Mexico who was also a very prominent individual in the Mexican Atomic Commission. And so he was telling her this information. So he's a very senior individual. No wonder he wanted to be anonymous. So anyway, he eventually did begin to speak out, and he spoke to the wrong people, unfortunately. He told some physicians about his contact experiences. And unfortunately, he was committed to a mental asylum for a month in 1989. After his release, he disappeared, never to be seen again. Part of the reason was that his wife was jealous. Here he is having these encounters with this beautiful extraterrestrial female. He's telling people, he's telling his family, they don't believe him, and his wife thinks he's having an affair with a student. So she thinks he's mad, and she thinks he's making it up. And so I guess out of spite, or whether she was angry or whatever, he told physicians, and they spoke to her, and she said, yeah, he's crazy, he's mad, no one would do what he's doing. Yeah, lock him up for a month, maybe he'll wake up. So they did, locked him up. He came out a month later, disappeared, and was never seen again. Subsequent investigations by Zither Rodriguez were unable to extract his papers and records from the Mexican security officials or his distraught family. So his family were devastated. The police and the security forces just confiscated all his material and kept it away from Zither Rodriguez. And subsequent investigations didn't get very far because the family were just so devastated they didn't want to talk about it anymore. So it's a very sad case, but the thing is, it gives us some important information that, in fact, extraterrestrials visiting us are being witnessed, or that they're being encountered by prominent individuals in very senior positions in some cases. So the Hernandez case has been investigated by Wendell Stevens, who's been able to corroborate some of Zither Rodriguez's research and the identity of Professor Hernandez. Okay, so this takes me to what was the response? Incredible stories, incredible information, some evidence, photos, film, testimonies, independent witnesses. Some investigators were able to do some thorough research. So, but what was the response by the mainstream UFO research community? Very important to look at some of these. Major Donald Kehoe, author of a number of books. The final one was Aliens from Space. Basically dismissed these incredible stories, these contactee reports. He distinguished between what he thought were genuine close encounter of the third kind sightings and contactee reports he viewed as wild tales and totally ridiculous. Page 198 from his book. He emphasized to, quote, weed out the bizarre stories and see the facts. The press unfortunately lumped all spaceman reports together, causing many people to reject all of the UFO evidence. So why did Kehoe take this approach? I think it's pretty clear why. He was a major, or former major in the US Marines. He was an engineer from background. He was a man who was used to working with hard evidence. Give me the evidence, show me the metal, that type of thing. And he investigated UFO reports from the military, from credible sources, servicemen, pilots, radar operators. He looked at some of the hard evidence. So he was used to that caliber of information. He was used to working with professionals. So naturally he was biased towards that category of information. He was used to getting reports from professionals. And so when he started to see these contactee stories from people who were kind of had written non-fiction books on meeting extraterrestrials, or had backgrounds in the sign painting business. I mean, he thought these people weren't really very credible, and he didn't want to waste any time. It was hard enough to convince Congress and serious people about the reality of UFOs, and forget about telling people about extraterrestrials from Venus and Saturn visiting us and meeting us secretly in the background. I mean, that's just wild stuff. You don't want to discredit genuine UFO research with those wild tales. Well, the problem was they weren't wild tales. Other prominent researchers took the same experience. Dr. Alan Hynek dismissed contactee reports of close encounter of the third kind experiences. He described them as, quote, pseudo-religious fanatics with low credibility value. So this is in his UFO experience, a scientific inquiry, again taking a similar approach to Kehoe. If you're going to do UFO research, concentrate on professionals who have credibility, hard evidence. Don't waste your time with these contactees with their wild stories of the Space Brothers and meeting these ETs. You just don't do that. And interestingly, Hynek provides what is an a priori argument for dismissing these cases. Quote, the repeater aspect of some UFO reporters is sufficient cause, in my opinion, to exclude their reports from further consideration, end quote. page 30 from his UFO experience. So basically, if you have a sighting of an extraterrestrial hopping out of a vehicle, and you see an extraterrestrial, and then you go report that case, well, that's credible. You saw one, you report it, that's it. But if you have these repeated experiences, as many of the contactees reported, meeting them, going in the ships, helping the ETs come here and adjust, you're having repeater experiences. So for Hynek, he makes basically an a priori argument to dismiss these out of hand because they're repeat experiences. Now, unfortunately, many of the key UFO researchers have backgrounds in the natural sciences, so their research methods are influenced by approaches that are essentially quantitatively established, or you adopt quantitative methods for proving whatever hypothesis you have, and so it needs to be substantiated. But that's a particular bias that natural scientists have because they're dealing with empirical phenomena. They're not really interested in what goes on in people's heads, what people perceive or what influences their perceptions and their interactions with others. That's the domain of social scientists. Well, unfortunately, a lot of this contactee work involves the research methods of the social sciences. And that would mean you would look at some of these repeated cases as being very important because they're giving us important information that needs to be investigated, not dismissed out of hand from some facile a priori argument, but basically you need to investigate it. And finally, James MacDonald dismissed contactee reports. He wrote, quote, "They are demonstrably psychotic or near psychotic, unlike some rational, productive, and obviously honest individuals who claim abduction by so-called alien beings." So again, taking the same approach of Kehoe and Hynek, but adding in something that has been very common in UFO research, which is that abduction reports are okay. You can research abduction reports because you place these people are hypnotized, and you have credible scientists, social scientists, such as Dr. Benjamin Simon, who investigated the Betty and Barney Hill case. I mean, he was a psychiatrist and put him under hypnosis, and he was able to get their testimony and so analyze it. And so they believed that these were the sort of reports that were credible because you had professionals investigating these abductee reports, people who, in most cases, didn't have conscious recollection of their abductions or their experiences, and so they had to be hypnotically produced by professionals. So these were credible. Much rarer were the fully conscious or recollections of these abductions, and Jim Sparks spoke about his fully conscious recollections, which a very small minority of abductees have that. But essentially what MacDonald is saying here is that abduction stories with the 4-foot-tall greys doing all these medical experiments, that's credible UFO research because the people investigating these abduction reports are serious scientists, psychiatrists and hypnotherapists and so forth. But these contactee reports, oh no, they're fully conscious recollections, repeater experiences, made up, psychotic experiences. No, forget those, dismiss those out of hand. So that was basically the response of the UFO research community. And that continues to the present day, unfortunately. So what corroboration can we find that these contactee reports of extraterrestrial visitors having integrated with human society is real? Is it? Can we prove it? Can we come up with some evidence? Well, there are a number of whistleblowers who have come forward to give us information that helps corroborate this. Robert Dean and the assessment, the NATO assessment that he witnessed from 1964 to 1965, described human-looking extraterrestrials who could infiltrate government, military institutions, and human society. He said they posed a security dilemma to NATO that greatly worried senior officials. So here's Dean saying that NATO was fully aware of extraterrestrials who looked like us, so much so that they could easily infiltrate human society, and this posed a security threat. And this was a NATO document that Dean witnessed. And I won't go into Dean's background, but as many of you know, he's very credible. And this is what Dean says he read in NATO's assessment. Quote, "There was a human group that looked so much like us that really drove the admirals and the generals crazy because they determined that these people, and they had seen them repeatedly, they had contact with them. These people look so much like us, they could sit next to you on a plane or in a restaurant and you never know the difference. And being a military and being primarily paranoid, that bothered the generals and admirals a little bit. That the fact that these intelligent entities could be involved with us walking up and down the corridors of SHAPE, the supreme headquarters of Allied powers in Europe, walking down the corridors of the Pentagon, my God, it even dawned on a couple of them that these guys could even be in the White House. So that's Dean's testimony. Ingo Swann, another prominent whistleblower, the first psychic employed in the CIA's remote viewing program that began in 1975, Project Stargate. His success rate was so great actually, Project Stargate began in 1972, but by 1975, his success rate was so great that he was recruited by a covert government operative called Mr. Axelrod to spy on extraterrestrials. That's how good he was. So Swann remote viewed extraterrestrials on the moon, of all places, who had bases on the dark side. So this is what Axelrod wanted him to remote view, and he was paying Swann $1,000 a day to do this. So obviously back in those days, $1,000 a day was quite a good consultancy rate, and I wouldn't mind getting that kind of rate for doing some of this work myself. So what happened later was that Swann was shopping in a Los Angeles supermarket when he noticed a very attractive, scantily clad female. He intuitively received information that she was an extraterrestrial. So he's a very credible psychic who's getting information that she's an extraterrestrial. And he then saw her being followed by two of Axelrod's operatives, so that made it even more interesting. He gets a hit, she's an ET, he looks at her, then looks around, he sees two of Axelrod's operatives following her. So Swann got the picture quickly that something was going on here, that this extraterrestrial was kind of a little dangerous for him to be associated with, so he quickly exited due to fear of what might happen. Then later, Axelrod phoned Swann to discuss whether the extraterrestrial female had telepathically communicated with him. He was concerned, Axelrod was concerned that she had communicated with Swann telepathically, and he wanted to make sure. So I got an audio clip that I wanted to play so you could hear exactly what Swann experienced. So here goes the audio.
And you noticed wasn't wearing any clothes.
Well, there were several. They were humans, just like we were, so far as I can tell. And they didn't have any clothes on.
They didn't have any clothes, those ETs on the moon. But later in Los Angeles, which you nickname and others have La La Land, you met an alleged ET in the supermarket.
I didn't quite meet her.
No, okay. You saw her. You saw her.
Well, I was giving a dinner party for somebody down there when I was staying with a friend, and we went to the supermarket to shop, and I was going to have stuffed artichokes. You know, I'm a gourmet cook on the side. And as I got into the vegetable part, there was this incredibly sexy gal standing at the artichokes looking through them, you know, and she had, you know, maybe 3 inches of clothing on and dark glasses, and she was just statuesque and everything. Oh, my God, would you look at that? So I went over there and started fiddling with the artichokes, trying to, you know, obviously casing her out the side of her eyes and everything like that, and I got the strangest feeling. The hair on my arm sort of, you know, I got goosebumps all over and stuff, and I said, it just dawned on me that this woman was an extraterrestrial. And I would have thought that was my imagination, of course. But when I had worked with Mr. Axelrod, he had two guys that sort of honchoed things around and so forth. And I sort of stepped back from this gal, and I got out the corner of my eye, saw one of these guys, you know, about 60 feet away, watching her and watching me. And I turned around, and there was the other one. There was these two of Mr. Axelrod's henchmen were there, I guess, following this gal around. And I put this together right away, and I said, oh, I've stepped into something that I don't belong in. So I skedaddled and went and hid in the bread department while I tried to figure out what to do. And the thing to do was to get out of the store.
Yeah. Well, a few days after encountering this being in the supermarket, you did receive a call.
Axelrod called me up,
yeah.
And he was very concerned about whether she had made telepathic contact with me. He was really, really worried about that. And I said I didn't think so, but I just, you know, this was a completely untoward event, and I just knew right away that this whole problem is they know, there are Earth people who know that there are ETs on the moon. They know there are ETs, and the big problem is that ETs can read our minds telepathically, but we can't read theirs because our telepathy is not developed enough. And that was the real problem that Mr. Axelrod was really involved in at the time.
Well, pretty important problem. Axelrod asked you to let him know when you achieved 65% accuracy in your psi work. After you did so in July of 77, you met him in the lobby of SRI, and he...
Okay, well, that gives you some idea of exactly what Ingo Swann had experienced, and so we have whistleblower evidence here that, in fact, extraterrestrials are walking amongst us, that they are indistinguishable from us, aside from being just incredibly attractive in some cases, and that this is known by government agencies who actually will monitor and follow these extraterrestrials around. Well, this is another whistleblower case, and I'm just going to go through this one pretty quickly. I just want to not spend too much time. But he worked with Britain's elite special boat service, and I can't confirm his identity, but I thought it would help illustrate the sort of testimony that Swann was providing here. So during his employment with Britain's Special Boat Service, he was tasked to arrest 2 extraterrestrial females. He shared what happened at a confidential gathering of UFO researchers. He was told to travel to the London Underground to South Kensington Tube station, where he boarded a train. The supervisor with him pointed out 2 women on the train that he was ordered to take away. These females were tall, blonde and blue-eyed and had the appearance of twins. He described them as having quite high foreheads and that they were the most beautiful women he had seen, with perfect physiques. He had described how everyone else on the train seemed to be in a trance and reacted to the abduction of the 2 people from a public train with complete indifference. So here you have on a train in England where 2 extraterrestrial females just doing whatever it is that they were doing are abducted by the security services of Britain, and these are very attractive beings, as in this particular photo of Jill, who is one of the 3 Venusians apparently that was associated with the Valiant Thor case that I'll get back to. He had not been told why they were being abducted and was concerned for their safety, and he took them away. As he took them away, he said that they conveyed a feeling of peace towards him. The man had been concerned that they may have been indirectly responsible for bringing these 2 women into harm's way. It was after about a week or 2 that he was sitting in a restaurant in Canary Wharf, London, when one of the 2 women that he had abducted came over to his table and smiled at him and generally conveyed that they were safe to him and that there was no need to worry. So just think about this. 2 extraterrestrial females on a train, they get abducted by this special boat service officer who arrests them, takes them in custody. They get processed through whatever the intelligence service does there in Britain. And this agent later feels very guilty. These are 2 beautiful women, and what happened to them? He's hoping that they didn't get hurt. So he's obviously worried about this. Well, obviously these extraterrestrial women were able to pick up on his thoughts, confirming what Swann said about the extraterrestrial female in the Los Angeles supermarket and what Axelrod was fearing, that they have telepathic abilities and that they can monitor our minds. And so just as Axelrod was concerned that Swann had telepathically communicated with this extraterrestrial female in the supermarket, in this case, the extraterrestrial female was able to monitor what was happening in this guy's mind and knew that he was upset and concerned, and so she just showed up just to show him and didn't say anything to him, just to demonstrate that she was okay. So what are the official responses to a lot of this information about extraterrestrials among us? I think it's pretty similar to the UFO phenomenon generally, where there's been debunking, as in the 1953 Robinson panel recommendation. The debunking aim, and this is what the panel recommended, the debunking aim would result in reduction in public interest in flying saucers, which today evokes a strong psychological reaction. This education could be accompanied by mass media such as television, motion pictures and popular articles. Such a program should tend to reduce the current gullibility of the public and consequently their susceptibility to clever, hostile propaganda, end quote. So that's the Robertson panel report, so UFO sightings in general, and these contactee reports would be debunked, and basically they would be debunked in a way to illustrate that this was a hostile attempt by foreign powers to influence the gullibility of the American public. Discrediting. The Special Operations Manual 1954, again, UFO crashes is, well, in this case, UFO crashes are what they want to discredit, but it could also equally apply to these contactee reports, CE3 encounters with extraterrestrials. Quote, witnesses will be discouraged from talking about what they have seen, and intimidation may be necessary. If witnesses have already contacted the press, it will be necessary to discredit their stories. This can best be done by the assertion that they have either misinterpreted natural events, or are the victims of hysteria or hallucinations, or are the perpetrators of hoaxes, end quote. So essentially the official response to contactee stories would be that they are the product of victims of hysteria, hallucinations, or perpetrators of hoaxes. And of course, in the meantime, the government is having various agencies monitor whatever extraterrestrial visitors are here and secretly getting information on what they're up to. NASA has the ET exposure law, as it's generally called. That was a federal regulation passed in 1969 by NASA dealing with anyone having extraterrestrial exposure. It offers a legal precedent for the detention and indefinite imprisonment of any individual who comes into contact with extraterrestrials. Governments are very crafty. If you pass a regulation and then you revoke it and put it on reserve, it doesn't matter. You've established a legal precedent. Any council of any government department can invoke that legal precedent for giving guidance on a particular case that any officer wants in terms of, say, for example, they find someone who's had extraterrestrial a CE3 encounter with an extraterrestrial. They can basically detain this individual under the extraterrestrial exposure law, even though it's been revoked in 1991 and is in reserve, because it establishes a legal precedent. The most relevant passage is that the NASA administrator or his designee can determine, quote, that a particular person, property, animal, or other form of life or matter, whatever is extraterrestrially exposed and quarantined such a person, property, animal, or other form of life or matter, whatever. The quarantine may be based only on a determination, with or without the benefit of a hearing, that there is probable cause to believe that such a person, property, animal, or other form of life or whatever is extraterrestrially exposed. So anyone who has met with an extraterrestrial who has integrated in our world, as Adamski, Menger, Hernandez and others have said, anyone who meets with an extraterrestrial and they are discovered, or the government agencies know this, that individual can be detained by the NASA administrator or his designee for as long as NASA wants. They have incredible power to do this. And this is known to the extraterrestrial visitors. So what are some of the conclusions we can draw from this data that I've come up with so far? Extraterrestrial visitors who are virtually indistinguishable from humans are living among us. This is what the evidence, I think, indubitably proves. They appear to have very attractive physical characteristics and described as among the most beautiful people ever witnessed. This is a constant theme amongst contactees, that these ETs are just so attractive. The extraterrestrials go to great trouble in learning the indigenous language of the culture they are immersed in, learning how to drive and navigate on highway systems and taking innocuous jobs over several years. So they really are doing as best they can to integrate themselves in human society. These human-looking extraterrestrials generally interact in gentle, non-invasive ways with contactees. Again, it's important to point out that these are non-invasive. Contactees describe them as respecting human free will and not involved in genetic experimentation or secret government agreements. So these human-looking ETs are not involved in that sort of stuff. So there's an example there of one extraterrestrial, apparently from the Alpha Proximus star system called Acon, who interacted with a contactee by the name of Elizabeth Clara. Human-looking ETs associated with invasive abductions, and this is something that often kind of muddies the waters a little bit, because people do notice that when there are invasive abductions, generally involving the kind of 4-foot-tall greys, and sometimes you see, as Jim Sparks described, in a few cases, 3 to 5% of the cases, you see these reptilians involved in these abductions. But sometimes there are these human-looking ETs involved in that. So who are they? Well, these human-looking ETs are involved in invasive abductions, according to this literature put out by the contactees, are described either as captured or cloned extraterrestrials forced to cooperate in these invasive procedures, or they are projected mental images. So I have the two lower images are from the Travis Walton case, where you had these two extraterrestrials that Walton encountered after he basically freaked out when he saw these grey extraterrestrials trying to perform these medical abductions, these medical procedures on him when he was taken up into a craft. The greys basically left the room, and then Walton walked around a little bit and eventually found these two human ETs and ran up to him saying, "Oh, did you see those grey guys?" and so forth. He thought that they would protect him. But of course, either they were clones or forced to work with them, or what I suspect were probably projected mental images. As you can look, if you look into their eyes, this hypnotic look that they had, that would be a sign that they probably were mental projections, and there were greys behind that. So what are these extraterrestrials doing living amongst us? Well, I think that they basically operate like a galactic Peace Corps, where they just blend in. Just as we send Peace Corps volunteers to Africa, Asia, South America, and one of their jobs is to blend in. Don't stand out too much, because the locals dislike it. Rich Yankees coming here to have experiences with us, they don't like that. So you've got to blend in, learn the language as much as possible, be as innocuous, and just do the mission that you're supposed to do in that culture, in that environment. So we know it quite well. The Peace Corps have been around for 40 years now doing this sort of work. So we know that the idea that the modus operandi is known to us. And it seems that extraterrestrials that look like us are doing the same thing. And so we can call them kind of like a galactic Peace Corps. The fact that extraterrestrials among us are monitored rather than taken into custody suggests that decisions have been taken by government agencies to monitor and tolerate this form of extraterrestrial interaction. In the cases I just discussed, we have Ingo Swann, where he sees that ET in the Los Angeles supermarket being monitored by the two operatives from this covert operative, Mr. Axelrod. So the government is clearly monitoring these extraterrestrials. They know they're here. They know that they're not here to create chaos or anything like that, or form a direct national security threat. They know that they're performing this kind of galactic Peace Corps mission. So, they're kind of goody-goody ETs. That's great, why not? So the government knows this, and they're not doing anything. They just want to watch these guys, make sure that the word doesn't get out, contain it, and they really get worried if any of their people are compromised in any way. That's why Axelrod was asking Swann, did she telepathically communicate with you? Did she do anything like that? And he said, no, nothing like that happened. He knew you didn't want to kind of get into trouble with those guys, and so nothing happened. So they're monitoring, and of course, we also know that in the case involving the Special Boat Service whistleblower, that they were aware of these two extraterrestrial females, took them into custody, got whatever information they needed from them, and let them go. And these ETs then continue to walk amongst us. So obviously, the Galactic Peace Corps are here, walking amongst us, the government knows about it, and they just have to report. So the whole kind of Men in Black movie, they just made this such a farcical kind of phenomenon. And you look at it and you laugh and you think, that can't be possible, right? But of course, the reality is, if you put the truth out there in front of people's faces, they won't believe it. That's what's happening. So extraterrestrials living amongst us do not directly pose a national security threat, though knowledge of their origin is deemed to be a national security threat, where individuals are sworn to secrecy. So the ETs themselves are not a threat because the government allows them to do it. They allow them to walk amongst us, they monitor them, that's okay. But you are not allowed to know about it. You are not allowed to go around and talk about these ETs amongst us. That is the national security threat. So secrecy is maintained by threats, intimidation, and discrediting witnesses or contactees. And boy, they've done a great job. I mean, you look at the contactee research. How many people really spend time on that? Very, very few. I certainly didn't. My first book, Exopolitics, Political Implications of the Extraterrestrial Presence, I mean, I thought I did a thorough job in that. That was published in 2004. But in fact, I didn't do the contactee literature. I didn't think it was credible. That was how good the kind of discrediting was. I mean, researchers trying to understand this field, you look at the contactee material and say, well, that can't be credible. Look at these people and look at what the UFO researchers have said about them. So you go for the abduction cases, which have more credibility and so forth. But unfortunately, that's a result of these concerted government policies to get us to not take this contactee research seriously. The supporting evidence supplied by contactees is routinely debunked and ignored, and ad hominem attacks are launched against any contactees or researchers supporting those cases. Most UFO researchers debunking contactee reports do so out of bias, faulty a priori reasoning, as I said in the case of Hynek, and a pathological form of skepticism. I mean, there's a place for objective criticism, but pseudo-skepticism or pathological skepticism, where you basically call someone a fraud when they haven't supplied you with corroborating data. That's wrong. If someone doesn't provide you with corroborating evidence to support your assertions, they're not a fraud. They just haven't provided you with corroborating data. That's it. I mean, you've got to continue investigating, or you've got to just leave that case alone. But what happens is that a lot of researchers, if they say, well, show me the data, show me the photos, show me the evidence, show me the hard metal, and if you don't do it, or if you don't do it to the satisfaction, they'll say, fraud, liar, hoaxer, and anyone supporting that case is attacked. Well, that is pathological skepticism. That has no place in science. It is not scientific at all. A genuine scientist will adopt modes of investigation which are critical analysis. You look at the evidence, you don't jump to conclusions in the absence of evidence. I mean, that famous phrase, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. That's basically what's happening here. So what do we do here? How do we protect private citizens who are a national security threat if they meet with these extraterrestrials living amongst us and talk about it? How do we protect them? We need to have the right to interact with extraterrestrials formally recognized. There's no other way. We have to have it formally recognized. We have to support any person who has met with any extraterrestrial among us so that they are not slammed into some obscure location by the NSA or the CIA because the NSA, because of the NASA administrators given these people carte blanche to lock away contactees. We've got to stop that. One of the things we did in Hawaii at our conference in 2006 was to adopt the declaration. We did it by consensus, which is an amazing thing. I thought we could just adopt consensus with the presenters, but the audience wanted to be part of that, and so we got consensus amongst the audience and the presenters. A phenomenal thing, and so we passed this declaration, or adopted this declaration on promoting peaceful relations with extraterrestrials. And it explicitly refers to such a right, that individuals have the right to interact with extraterrestrials living amongst us. We need to recognize that. We need to mobilize and have that right protected and recognized. So that's a photo of the presenters at the 2006 conference. So the third article of the declaration, and I brought about 50 copies, and hopefully you'll have some of those on the desk just outside where you can get actually DVDs of the conference proceedings. So they'll be just out there, out the front after this talk. The third article of the declaration states that signatories and supporters, quote, affirm the natural right of all citizens to have open contact with representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations in all cases and to engage in non-official diplomacy, end quote. So that is a very important right we need to support, and we need to have that recognized. Otherwise, any individual who has this kind of interaction becomes by the kind of skewed reasoning of the national security system that's been put in place to monitor these extraterrestrial visitors among us, these shadow government entities that know of this, that they have the power to just lock away anyone. So this does make non-official diplomacy not some joke, not some pie-in-the-sky concept that's going to apply 20 years, 30 years in the future after the ETs come and after the government tells us that they're real and it's okay to interact with them. It's happening now. It is happening. It's real. Non-official diplomacy exists. It's called citizen diplomacy. Citizen diplomacy has been recognized in international affairs, and I was involved in it for a number of years while teaching and researching at American University. We did it. Citizen diplomacy in international politics. Even though the State Department at the beginning were very skeptical and didn't want to cooperate with us, they saw us as amateurs who were there, who could possibly compromise very sensitive state diplomatic protocols and actions. But we did it, and now the State Department is a big supporter of non-official diplomacy. The State Department, the US State Department supports this. We need to move from international affairs, where citizen diplomacy is accepted, to galactic affairs, where citizen diplomacy is also recognized as legitimate, as necessary, and as helpful. It's not competitive. So some final comments. 8 minutes left. I just want to leave a few minutes for questions. Lack of UFO research of contacted reports of human-looking extraterrestrials among us, in contrast to the research of invasive extraterrestrial visitors, has two reasons. So there's two reasons why most researchers focus on abduction reports and not on these contactee reports. One, bias and poor research methodology on the part of veteran UFO researchers regarding contactee testimonies. And I've pointed three of the big names in UFO research, and in my mind, they suffered from bias, poor research methodology when it came to these contactee cases. The second case is, two, a deliberate shadow government policy to steer public attention towards invasive rather than non-invasive interactions with extraterrestrials in order to justify draconian national security laws concerning extraterrestrial visitation. We all know if there are beautiful, Nordic, attractive extraterrestrials walking amongst us, people aren't going to get frightened of that. They're going to show me where they are. I want to meet these guys, right? I mean, everyone's going to say that. Secrecy won't last. The secrecy system will collapse if people's perceptions of extraterrestrials were focused around the truth that these extraterrestrial visitors are human-looking and they're around us. If that broke out, the secrecy system would collapse. It couldn't be sustained. But because people are filled with these stories of these invasive procedures of, the short greys and reptilians and so forth, then people get scared, they're frightened, and psychologically, you don't want to kind of really deal with that. It's yucky, and so in the collective unconscious, we kind of keep disclosure away because it's like, it's unpleasant. You don't want to know the truth, getting up there and medical experiments, all that stuff. Not that I'm denying the abduction reports. I know they happen. They're real. But there's another phenomenon here, and that's been ignored. And what I want to do is bring balance into the field so we can see the truth, the big picture. So final comments. Human-looking ETs are helping prepare humanity for a future of open contact with a variety of ET visitors whose behavior varies greatly when interacting with humanity. 3 of these extraterrestrials supposedly went to a meeting at Howard Menger's property in High Bridge, New Jersey, back in 1959. They were supposedly from Venus. You have a picture there, very famous picture. A number of researchers believe it's real. I just spoke to Wendell yesterday. I asked him, do you think this is real? And he said, yes, he thinks it's real. Valiant Thor on the right, Don in the middle, and then Jill on the left. 3 supposed extraterrestrial visitors that are part of this galactic Peace Corps here to help us, and they spent their time apparently briefing senior officials at the Pentagon and in Washington, D.C. Current projects, setting up the Exopolitics Institute, I mentioned that. in Hawaii. We just got our 501c3 status. Just speaking with the IRS, and just before I came here, they said it was coming through. So we do have our 501c3 status, and we can now move ahead to really build a worldwide organization that can make a difference in helping researchers in the field take this seriously. And you've got to provide support for the researchers so that they don't have to give up jobs. I mean, people like me and the other researchers who have threatened their careers, Alfred Weber threatened his career. People like us, it's crazy to do that. Why would you give up a profession to do this research, and you're ignored by your peers, and the general public kind of think you're trying to scam them, for selling too many DVDs or books, and you're giving up salaries, and you're going to sell 20 DVDs, and somehow you're scamming the public. It's just amazing. But that's what happens often. That's the way people think. Setting up a certification program, teaching programs for people who want to learn about citizen diplomacy initiatives. One of the things I'm doing, there's a brochure on the Exopolitics Institute that's out there that you can take with you. And finally, our conference that's coming up from May 11 to 13. In Hawaii, we have brochures out there, and you can collect them just from the front desk. So there's just a few minutes left, so I'll leave that open for questions.
Dr. Salla, it's wonderful what you're doing and being able to allow people, normal human beings, to communicate with extraterrestrials and opening up communications with everyone. But my concern in particular are some ETs are good, sometimes they're not so good. And I was concerned that the Hawaii Declaration has no concerns at all in it regarding harmful extraterrestrial contact. Why is that?
Well, that's a good question. What I want to do is to try to bring balance into the research that's out there on extraterrestrial visitors among us. And while people are very aware of the invasive procedures of some of the extraterrestrial visitors, people are generally not aware of the non-invasive procedures. And those people who participated in the Hawaii conference were very interested in promoting friendly, cooperative relations with extraterrestrials so that we could reach out and make contact with those extraterrestrials who are basically interacting in non-invasive ways. Dealing with the invasive procedures of other extraterrestrial groups is a problem, and I acknowledge that, and I think it needs to be dealt with in a way that doesn't minimize the non-invasive interactions that are occurring. So we need to find a way of balancing these, and that's what we tried to do. And I know you're not happy with the Hawaii Declaration, and we've had some correspondence, so maybe we can continue that and maybe have another couple of questions before we finish. Thank you, Maurice. Okay, all right. We're out of time. Thank you.